Today I'll be taking you through the implementation of our AWS networking design. Inside of this, we have three main services we're going to implement. The first one, Amazon VPC, is our Amazon Virtual Private Cloud. This looks to segregate networks and allowing easy separation of application environments. Next, we have our Network Load Balancer, and this looks to distribute traffic across applications. Third and finally, we have our Network Access Control Lists, or NACL, and these accept and deny traffic at a subnet level. First, we start with our Virtual Private Cloud. We search for it in the search bar and click the Create VPC button. Next, we'll choose VPC only, and we'll give it a name. Here we've decided to split the VPCs by application level or application environment. Here we've decided on the production and we're putting in the subnet. Next, we're going to create a subnet, and we have to create a variety of these across our environment. So here we'll show you an example of one we have to make. We hit Create Subnet in the top right, select the VPC we created, and give the subnet a name. Here we're copying from the list that we have, so that'll be the first public subnet. We then grab the IP and subnet range, and ensure everything's correct. Hit the Create Subnet button. Next, we're moving on to our Load Balancer. So we search for that in the bar, go across to the Create Network Load Balancer. We give it a name, again in the production environment. It is an internal network load balancer, so we choose internal for the scheme. We provide the VPC that we're going to apply it to. We then choose a subnet that it's going to sit in. Ensure it's the right security groups that we want for the network load balancer. Here you can see extra configuration. We'll keep that all default and hit Create Load Balancer. Finally, we have to create our network access control list. So we do the same by looking for it in the search bar. In the top right, we hit Create Network ACL. We give this one a name. And choose the VPC we want it to apply to.
Hi, I'm Andre, and now I'll be going through the security aspects of our AWS system. So the components that we'll be using for our proposed model will be AWS Web Application Firewall, AWS Shield Standard for DDoS protection, AWS Identity and Access Management, and CloudWatch. Okay, first we'll start by setting up CloudWatch. CloudWatch collects monitoring and operational data in the form of logs, metrics, and events and visualizes it using automated dashboards so you can get a unified view of AWS resources, applications, and services that run in the AWS and on-premises. Alarms can be created based on metric value thresholds specified and can also watch for anomalous metric behavior based on machine learning algorithms. Automated actions can be set up to notify if an alarm is triggered and automatically start auto-scaling. So to set up CloudWatch, we'll go to the Identity and Access Management dashboard. We'll then click on Roles. We'll then select Create Role. We'll leave the trusted entity type as AWS Service, and we'll select EC2 as the use case. Then click Next, and then for permissions, we will select the CloudWatch Agent Server Policy. Then we'll click Next, give the role a name, So we'll just say example 1, and then we'll select create role. Okay, so next we'll show how the identity and access management works. So the AWS Identity and Access Management is essential management to securely manage identities and access to AWS services and resources. The IAM can manage identities across single AWS accounts or centrally connect identities to multiple AWS accounts, grant temporary security credentials for workloads, continually analyze access to the right number of permissions to ensure least privilege access. So first we'll go to the IAM dashboard. We'll then click on user. Then we'll select create user. We'll give the user a name. Provide user access to the AWS Management Console. Auto generate, leave that default. Then click next. We'll then click attach policies directly. You could also copy permissions from an existing user or add a user to a group with specified permissions, depending on the organization's needs. For now, we'll just attach policies directly. We'll just select administrator access as an example, then click next, and then review and create. Okay, so next we'll go into the web application firewall. The WAF monitors web requests that are forwarded to an Amazon API gateway, Amazon CloudFront distribution, or an application load balancer. Resources can be protected based on conditions that are specified, such as source IP address, country of origin, etc. So we'll go into the WAF and Shield dashboard. We'll then select Create Web ACL. We'll give the ACL a name. So for an example, ACL1, we'll leave the region as it is. We'll then click Next. We'll then add rules. Select Add My Own Rules and Rule Groups. We'll select Rule Builder, name. We'll give the rule a name. Block country, for example. And if the request matches a statement, so what country the request originates from, we'll select Russia as an example. So any source IP addresses that originate from Russia will be blocked. We'll then add the rule. And here we'll allow any other web request that doesn't match the statement. Select next, select the rule, click next, leave this as default, click next, and then we review and create our rule, web ACL. Okay, so our last component is AWS Shield. AWS Shield is a managed distributed denial of service protection service that provides continuous attack detection and automatic mitigations. So AWS Shield offers 2 tiers of protection. The first one being standard, which is free and enabled by default, as you can see. And the second tier is advanced, which an organization must subscribe to, which costs 3,000 USD per month.
Today I'll be demonstrating how to set up storage services for our financial application. So first we'll begin with the RDS SQL option. So we'll be going to services. Then we'll go under databases. We'll pick the RDS option, and then once the screen loads up, we'll click on create database option. And then we'll configure the engine options. In our case, it will be MySQL, and then we can select the My engine version accordingly. And then we'll be selecting the multi-AZDB instance for in our case to have a primary and secondary DB separately. And then we'll configure the name DB instance identifier, that is the name of the database. And after setting up the master username and the master password, we can configure the additional storage for our DB instance. Once that is done, under connectivity, we can choose and connect to an EC2 computer instance that is already uh, set up. And we can also create a new VPC, or we can use a default VPC for our database services. Then we can also configure the security rules, and we can create a new subnet group for this DB. And also, to increase security, we can add a new security group and configure the uh, access accordingly. Then once we are all set up, we can click on the create database button. That will create our database. Now once we are done with RDS, we'll be setting up the Amazon DynamoDB service for our application. So we'll go to databases, and then under databases we'll click on DynamoDB. And because DynamoDB is a NoSQL based database, so we'll click on create table option, and then we'll populate the fields like table name and specify a partition key for our DB. Once this is done, we'll click on the create table option, and that will set up the table for our DynamoDB instance. Now we'll be setting up Amazon S3, which is an object-based storage, and we'll be using this for our financial application as a backup storage. So we'll go to the search bar and search for S3 and click on the first option. Once it loads up, we'll click on the create bucket option, and then we'll specify the bucket name and the region where we want this bucket to be created. And then we can configure all other mandatory configurations. And once that is done, we can click on the create bucket option to create a new bucket. And once our bucket is created, we can go and open our bucket, and under the management tab, we'll have the option to set up a lifecycle rule. This will specify when the data should be migrated to our bucket. Next, we'll be setting up Amazon S3 Glacier. So we'll go back and click search for S3 Glacier. So S3 Glacier is an archival storage, and this is used for to long-term store our data, which is not readily accessed. So we'll create create vault option, and then we'll specify the vault name, and we'll create the vault. And here also we can specify the lifecycle rule to transfer data to our S3 Glacier instance. So once we are done with setting up Amazon S3 Glacier, we'll go back to the home page, and we'll search for Elastic Cache. So Elastic Cache is an in-memory cache service by Amazon, which will help to increase the performance of our application. So we'll have two options. One is Redis and one is Memcached. So we can choose any of these for application. And once we click on the Redis option, we'll choose the cluster, the configuration, and the cluster information. And we can configure a new subnet group or choose an existing subnet group for this. And then we have all other options that can be configured. And we can also configure this elastic cache and connect to our DB instance to increase the performance of our application drastically. With this, we have configured and set up the AWS storage services for our financial application. These features will help us to ensure performance, scalability, and cost effectiveness.